What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Actuali Podcast. I'm Chris.
I'm DJ.
And today we're back in our new studio, and we are now going to go through some recent current events and some videos I found on the interwebs here, do a little bit of commentary, and reflect on how this relates to awakening in this time of meaning crisis in our world. I think that's a good summation of where we're about to go.
Yep.
Hope y'all are doing well out there. If you enjoy podcasts, get out there and support your other fellow creators of content, because we are now the media and we're taking over where that legacy media left off. So irresponsibly, as it has become something of a yellow journalism these days. So we're going to play a little bit of a different game now.
Yeah.
So for our first video, we're going to introduce Paul Kingsnorth, and he's sharing a conversation on the Unheard podcast in this clip. Paul Kingsnorth is a very interesting individual here, but I'm just going to kind of let him speak for himself, and if you find what he says intriguing, then you can go search him out on YouTube.
And you'll be reacting live with me because I haven't seen this one yet because
He
I
has
didn't
not.
do my homework.
I haven't actually seen this in a couple weeks now, I think, since I first discovered it, so it'll be a little fresh for me, but I do remember the timestamp that I saved for us, so we're going to jump on into it, guys. Here we are. Mr. Paul, let's roll.
To me, when I was young, the left was against corporate power, and it was against state power, and it was against pharmaceutical companies, which they thought were corrupt and bad, and it was certainly in favour of free speech and free association and protest. And during COVID, that all swiveled round, and suddenly a lot of my friends who I would consider to be leftish, liberalish people were now all in favour of draconian state power, all in favour of vaccine passports, all in favour of shutting everything down, all in favour of removing from the internet anyone who wanted to question any of this, including me. And I thought that was tyrannical, and I still think it was tyrannical. I think it was a completely disastrous response. And I live in Ireland. In Ireland, we had a vaccine passport system where you couldn't go out anywhere for 6 months if you didn't have your digital ID, and I wouldn't have a digital ID or a vaccine. And so we had to sit and watch all of the newspaper columnists calling us neo-Nazis and conspiracy theorists, so that was nice.
Yeah, that's...
And it's just, it was an insanity. It was an insanity, but it was an example of machine overreach. It was an example of digital control. It was an example of how you can construct a system to monitor and manage absolutely everything, and how you can demonize people who ask questions, even if they happen to know what they're talking about.
Do you now, in retrospect, now that the sort of dust seems to be settling on that era, do you now think it was a sort of accident or a matter of hysteria, just sort of people getting overexcited and getting it wrong, or do you have a darker view?
Well, I think it was a few different things. I think it was hysteria. There was clearly mass hysteria going on. There was a huge panic. There was a refusal to deal with what was going on in a calm way. But there was also very clearly a desire to, I mean, almost every government in the world rolled out the same system at the same time. They all had their digital IDs ready. They all had their digital passports ready. They all wanted to use precisely the
WHO was telling us they were
technology
planning
that
on doing
is
this years
capable
before, so...
of monitoring and scanning entire cultures to roll this stuff out. And it's not conspiratorial to say that vaccine passports and digital health IDs on a global scale were being discussed long before COVID happened. You don't have to believe that the whole thing is a pandemic to see that when it came along, they went, okay, let's slot this into the system that we've been discussing for a long time. The rational, global, sensible, machine-like way to respond to this illness is shut everybody down, control everybody, monitor everybody, give them a digital ID, and push them out, push them off the internet if they've got a problem with it, and it worked. So I think it was, you don't need to believe in a giant conspiracy to see that there was a particular approach that was taken immediately, partly because of the hysteria. And I'm quite convinced by the idea that because everything it was very difficult once you'd whipped everyone up into a state of terror to tell them actually it wasn't maybe that bad and maybe we should scale it down a bit. And when you've whipped everyone up into a state of terror, people then want the control mechanisms. They say, well, we need to be saved. So I was just really disturbed by how easy it is to control people by frightening them.
You mind pausing this?
Yeah, I think that's a good point there.
Yeah, well, just like the first thing he said, watching your normally good-willed, good-peopled friends suddenly turn very, very, very tyrannical.
Oh yeah, everyone was so scared.
And I'm,
Here's a solution, and everyone's amped up about it because this is life or death, you know. So
Well, and
they
I
feel
can-
justified in
I can really relate to it. You know, I used to hang out in the most liberal town in West Virginia, and it was actually liberal in the best sense for a good long time. You know, great musicians, great artists, cool people.
Oh, man.
Weirdos of all sorts.
little mini musical mecca.
Yeah,
Old Shepherd Sound.
but man, like, you know, I won't say the change really started at COVID, but really started when Trump was elected, when it started getting a little weird. I didn't notice it because, you know, you say dumb stuff when you're young, right? But as it goes on, you know, you see it morphing, and then COVID hit, and we were already being primed by mass media and, sales and stuff to be getting into this mindset. You know, all of our movies are like, you know, at that time, definitely post-apocalyptic movies. You know, Walking Dead was a huge thing. Like, you know, it was
A lot of it, I think you're right.
Yeah,
There's also the
yeah.
aspect of where major media cartels, corporate apparatus are purposefully gearing or tailoring certain kinds of content to psychologically condition us to accept.
And so
such,
there's a theory that is being applied by such people like the UN and the WHO, and it's called nudge theory. You could look it up, like to nudge.
Ooh.
To nudge.
That
It's-
sounds like
it's
the
not just
boiling the frog kind of analogy. there.
yeah, it's more of like, you know, you
Incremental.
put ideas of, and it's not such a foreign thing. We've been sold stuff on the internet, and it nudges us into like, okay, well, it's summertime, and you got to have the good vacation, or when you're doing the summer thing, you got to have the cool pool noodles and all this stuff, and you know, we'll put movies on TV that are seasonal that get you into that same thing. That's a little bit more innocent, but the nudge theory is you just keep nudging, not big steps, but little steps and little steps. And once we realize we've gone a little too far, we think
late
we've gone
almost,
too
yeah.
far. Well, they'll be like, okay, we'll scale it back a little bit, but still the damage was already done.
And they're
you know,
incrementally
The
conditioning
track
us
trace
to
database
accept.
was
Yes.
already instilled and is now there. So, and you know, this isn't just a them problem. You know, like the big conspiracy and everything. It's an us problem too. We have, you know, like mass hysteria is a real thing. Humans are social. We're susceptible to cognitive pandemics, if you will, where it changes the very way we think.
Sicknesses of mind that's
Yeah, and how we think, not just what we think, but how we think. You know, deep down into the deep nitty gritty.
It's so true, though. And so there's this, and we see this around the world, and we've seen this for the last several decades, since, in fact, I think the early to mid 1900s, with Edward Bernays, the nephew of Freud, who used Freud's psychological or insights into the human mind to create what we now know as public relations or propaganda, and how to convince large groups of people to accept certain things became an art form. So the sophistication of the psychological manipulation techniques that are being employed against us today, especially now that they're boosted with AI and
Yeah, right.
decades of research, are so influential on us. And it is no wonder that even some of the most intelligent people we know, people smarter than myself, I have seen taken in by a lot of the current how do you put it? The current new frames that are being presented as reality to
The
us.
acceptable narrative.
Yeah, the acceptable narrative. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And so people are joining in because we can be, even the most intelligent person can be easily psychologically, emotionally manipulated. So as soon as they start to tag our emotions is when it bypasses our rationality, and we end up accepting things that we would never accept otherwise.
There's a series of books. It's called the Sort of Truth series. It's not the most well written, and the author is controversial because he's more of a, you know, I guess conservative male mentality. But anyway, the first book is called The Wizard's First Rule. And the wizard's first rule is people will believe, well, first off, people are idiots. They'll believe a lie either because they want it to be true or they fear that it is.
So we're kind of foolish. We might not be dumb all the time, but we are all
and so
potentially foolish.
we either want something to be true, like, you know, like sorry to be controversial, but men can be women. We want that to be true, right? And we'll believe that lie because we want it to be true. But then we fear that Trump's going to start locking up all the all the liberal media and go after, put people in camps and Russia, and just name off at the COVID, which, mind you, COVID was bad. It was bad. Our reaction in the future, it might come to pass that it was worse than the actual infection. I'd hate to say it that way, but looking at excess deaths around the world that implemented the vaccination programs with under-tested gene therapies.
You may be right there, and it's hard to face these kinds of things. We hate feeling like we were wrong, but I think a helpful orientation, we've talked about this on the podcast before, is to care for us to try on the posture of caring more for what is true and good for one and all than personally being right. It's okay to be wrong, but we get so identified with our ideas, with our particular group that we feel a part of and this and that. We don't want to admit when it might be wrong. We would rather believe that it's right about everything because we feel like it reflects on us because we identify with these different ideas that we hold. We don't have to identify with ideas. We can just see them as useful and be willing, be interested in being wrong, and even like let's challenge our own conceptions of reality and see where there might be more information. I just want to find out what is going to be true and best for one and all. So let that be our orientation. That's a really, really helpful
and
guide
it can be fun to be wrong because then it can allow you to gain insights that you wouldn't have, like, and even insights that may prove your own argument too. Like I got an example. I was talking with a friend of mine about the efficacy of charter schools, and I misstated some stuff, but then I went and I'm still looking into it, but looking into the research that's gone into it, and it's opened up my mind to a way of thinking about it. Like, like say, you can't just, say like so many charter schools compare it to the national average without also showing the comparison of other schools in the country to the national average and then equal proportion to amount of how many schools there are and that type of stuff. So it opened me up into looking at it that way, which is a lot more fair and reasoned way of looking at the argument too. And I was, I was wrong in the beginning. I wasn't completely wrong, no, but I was wrong in my statement. I think you're wrong. And I'm like, well, shit, I'm going to go look up the stats. And I looked up the stats and I was, 3/4 to half of the way wrong. But the quarter that's left is actually the important thing that might, give me a deeper understanding of.
We're all prone to cognitive bias. We're going to try and confirm our already preferred or held belief. So the willingness to really question ourselves is something that, that has to be cultivated. We get used to the idea, but I really feel like that orientation I suggested makes that so much easier. It becomes like a heartful orientation rather than just a mental orientation. It's like, well, I care for what's good for one and all. So, hey, it's okay if I find out that I was wrong about something. Now I know better, and now I'm informed with upgraded intel, and I can make wiser decisions, and that helps those around me as well. So that's nothing but a win. So that's it's a new game we got to play here, fam, because we have been so hit against one another. And don't you feel that out there? Like the world has been divided by red and blue, left and right, and these very stringent, excessive ideas of what's right and wrong. So much exaggeration and characterization of people is going on. So much, these really broad, super generalizing group labels that we're throwing on to whole giant groups of individuals without accounting for the depth of any one individual, just saying, oh, well, if you like Trump, then you must be some far-right white supremacist lunatic, or you're a neo-Nazi or this or that. And or even if you just disagreed with the vaccine mandates or some of the COVID measures. These were things we weren't even allowed to talk on YouTube about a couple years ago. People were getting banned and canceled from social media channels, from Twitter to Facebook to left and right. And this happened to hundreds of thousands to millions of people.
Hey, I've been recently canceled. One of my shows got canceled because at a local bar I pissed off one of the political queer community. Now, mind you, I don't have a problem with gay people, lesbians, bisexuals, trans people. But queer, I do have a problem with because that is a political ideology that is supposed to be an oppositionally defiant system against anything that is norm. And I'm not like I'm a newsie and I'm a politico in the sense of I follow politics, but I don't like things when they become political. I'm not down with that.
So you mean queer is in like a political,
Yeah,
a politically charged
queer
kind of activist?
queer theory trademark.
Queer theory TM, I got
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Which is like most of the stuff you hear comes from queer theory TM. But anyway, yeah. So I made somebody feel unsafe, and they called the bar. And mind you, like somebody I made feel unsafe, the female.
How did you make her feel unsafe? Or was that just the
well,
weaponized term that she used?
I'll tell the story then.
I hate to say this that way because I don't even know who
Well,
you're talking
unsafe
about.
is unsafe is one of those
it
words.
sucks when people feel that way, and I'm sure it didn't feel good for her to hear your opinion if it went against her belief.
Well,
but-
she barely heard any of my opinion.
Wait, so what were you trying to actually say then?
Well,
And
okay, so this
how
is
do you
what
think it was
happened.
mistaken, perhaps.
Two girls, forgive my language, but one that I assumed was a butch lesbian, and then her straight bestie, who, that kind of thing. That's, what I'm used to seeing, and my, lesbian friends were like. So they're like, hey, we like your look, because I wear kilts, and, I kind of look like a hippie, even though I'm not a freaking hippie. But they invite me to sit down, and I think what started it all was Happy Pride Month. And then I started asking questions, and the first question I asked was like, in the rainbow flag, why no indigo? And I got a really interesting answer to that I haven't thought of, which was, well, then that would be the Christian rainbow flag, and they're trying to differentiate themselves from that. So I asked more questions like, is that like being opposed to it? So it's opposed to Christianity, like in opposition to? And she was like, no, not really. And then buzzword, this other thing. And I'm not going to go through it because too many of the thought defeating utterances that come with, any super activism type of thing nowadays. And the point where it turned sour and everything was fine, I was just asking questions and happy. I'm a pretty friendly dude and can be sociable when I want to. And, like she's not the first queer person I've talked to and hung out with. I've got a disproportionate amount of queer friends for living in West Virginia. But yeah, so I basically, the only opinion I gave was just like, well, when it comes to the trans thing, biologically male is XY. Biologically female is XX. Anything in between is trans or the other stuff.
A lot of trans and non-binary people, as I understand, actually agree with that.
Yeah.
But some of them take an even more radical tact with it.
Well, that's where the queer TM
there is no
comes in.
actual
Like queer TM, that's
real
what makes it a problem.
Sex itself is even socially encouraged or socially created.
That's the I hate to say it, but that's the cult end of it. You can't question the rhetoric. You can't, and if you do, then you're outside of it, and you're not one of us.
That's where you've really drank the Kool-Aid. Like you drank all the Kool-Aid, and you make another pitcher of Kool-Aid.
So I pissed them off, and I
drinking more Kool-Aid.
I may have said something that made them feel uncomfortable right as it happened, because when she slammed her hands down, I was like, I feel this is done. I feel like you're not listening to me, and then puffed off. I was like, well, okay. And then I went inside, saw a friend of mine.
Man, we all want to belong so much in this strange, confused
This is
world.
what really pissed him off, I think. I used the word tranny because I was talking to a friend of mine. It's like, well, back in my day, they were called trannies. And that was fine.
He did the back in my day.
Well, yeah, like, I don't know. Like, I've known a lot of dudes that wear dresses that are really tall that call themselves that.
This is a very
That's
new
what it
fad, and a lot
was.
of people are like, no, it's been this way for thousands of years. There's been, three-spirit people and this and that. Actually, these
Two-spirit.
Two-spirit, sorry. Yeah, these
I know way
things
too
are
much
actually
about
kind
this.
of rare, but 99% of the
yeah, and
cultures on the human
I
planet.
wasn't even calling them that or anything like that. I was mentioning to a friend of mine, and I'm not going to name him, but a friend of mine who also is kind of like me, the way I think and see things, like, and he can kind of understand. It's like, yeah, and I didn't even say anything crazy. Like, it's just when you know more than that, more about their activism or their cult than they do, they get very angry. And nowadays, people get really angry when you insult their intelligence, proving them wrong. To go full circle back to where we're talking about being proved wrong and getting pissed off.
Well, yeah,
So
yeah. I see what you're saying because
long story short, they called the bar. They
Okay.
said I made them feel unsafe, and they knew I was having a show because I was advertising the show by talking to people, and said I was saying some training stuff and made them feel unsafe. Now I'm hearing it third hand. I'm hearing it from a band member who heard it from the owner of the bar, and I don't blame the owner of the bar. Hey, buddy, if you see this, I don't blame you. It would be cool, like, you know, to like stick up for me a little bit, but I get it. You know, just trying to keep the lights on and keep your
keep the
employees paid.
peace. Yep, yep.
You know what I mean? But
So,
yeah,
so what would you say to this girl if you could say anything to her right now, or anyone out there that might feel that they would take her side that is listening to this right now?
I was gonna say smart ass remark. I was like, well, if it's her, I would say that men are XY and women are XX. But
Back to the debate.
yeah, well, and start it from there. And that's one thing that pisses off people that I do that I.
Well, what's
but
another
again,
thing that you could say so that she would understand that, you know, you're not someone that's trying to be cruel.
I'd
You
go-
know, you have strongly held
Well,
opinions as well.
I'm not going to apologize, and I'm not going to go on that. But I would ask more questions, being like, "Well, what are you trying to get out of this?"
Sure, I'm not saying you should apologize.
No,
either.
no.
Yeah.
Like, but this is how I'd go about it. Is well, what are you trying to get out of this? What is this actually doing for you? Have you weighed the pros and cons of, you know, not the lifestyle or the identity, but the thought mechanisms you're using, and what do these words that you're using actually mean? And have you read into your own, you know, the theories that you're putting out there?
What are the orientations?
And if you haven't,
of,
I can share these books
Yeah.
with you. You know, like I can tell you where to find them, you know, and go look them up.
what are some things you would point to when we're looking at this current ideological trend
Well,
that people are calling wokeism, or, you know, and this branch of it, which would be queer theory in this case, but this includes white fragility doctrine, you know, critical race theory and all of its extensions.
Well, first off, if you were of my, you know, like my political spectrum or whatever, whatever that's worth, I would say check out James Lindsay, because he goes very deeply in depth into this, and that's where you can really find who's who and the what's what. But then also,
Yeah, even if you don't like him, he's definitely one of the most
well, you know, look up the, you know,
historians
Ibram
of-
X. Kendi's, and look up the, you know, what's her name, White Fragility, that book.
Robin DiAngelo.
Yeah, read into those and
Look at the counters to them as well.
Well,
I mean, we
and-
got to look at both sides of these things and see. So you're suggesting actually look at this and try and pick
Read
it
it.
apart, maybe read it and understand.
Well, yeah, well, that's the thing. That's how you defeat any cult, is like tell them to delve deeper into
Because I have
their
friends
own
and family
rhetoric.
that have read some of this stuff and been taken in by it too.
Well, the
And
other
so-
thing is you have to read it as, instead of like an instruction manual or something, it's like, I'm going to agree with this. Read this as, try to tear it apart. Anything that, and that goes for anything, regardless of whether it's
So
cult
try and read
material.
it objectively. You know, kind of utilize the scientific method, utilize your critical thinking.
Well,
to-
I would say actually not even objectively, read it in a way to tear it apart, to tear the theory apart, line by line, to disagree with it. And if it's good, you can't disagree with it in the end, or you
sure,
find
sure.
more
Well, that's what I mean by being
Yeah,
objective,
yeah.
being willing to challenge it, being willing
Well, I would
to
say
look and see if there's
go even further in the other end, be hostile towards it. If you believe in it, be hostile towards it. I think, like, you know, so like if you're a Christian and you really want to get down to the truth of the Bible, or if you're Muslim and you want to get down to the truth, you have to read your texts in a way that really breaks them down.
as though you're really trying to disprove it.
And break it down and break it down and break it down and break it down, because there will be the truth when you have.
Well, you can do that with a sense of wonder. You can do that with, you know, just naked curiosity.
But that's the scientific
I don't know if
method,
we necessarily
is to
need
is to disprove. And
a
if you
hostile orientation, or,
Well, not
or that,
necessarily
or maybe I'm just
hostile,
saying
but-
that people are going to misunderstand that term. But so I think what you're saying is you really want to eagerly challenge your own preferred beliefs and whatever you're studying. Be willing to take it apart completely,
Well,
and
like-
get to its very bottom and try and disprove it. And because if it can't be disproven, if it can stand up to the test, then it might be something worthwhile. That sounds like Buddha's suggestion, that don't believe anything because your parents tell you,
Yeah.
any authorities tell you, because it's popular and many people say it's true. Don't even believe anything because I say it's true, as Buddha. Only after careful investigation, thoroughly understanding it and finding it to be good and true for one and all, then accept it and live up to it. And that's
Well, and
I
that
think
that goes down to with yourself too. You
Yeah.
do the same thing with yourself as you do with well, we should be doing with ourselves what we
Right.
should be doing with the other things, which is you're trying to find it something's true, try to disprove it. So, you know, if you're like, well, I feel like nobody's listening to me. It's like, okay, well, I feel like nobody are people are like people actually not listening to me. Okay, so that like maybe like 2/3 aren't actually listening to me, but am I being reasonable? Yeah, no, I'm probably not being reasonable, so that would make up the 2/3. Okay, you know, like
in
breaking
what way
that
may
down.
I be being off-putting and
Yeah,
all that?
instead of being
Yeah,
like,
that's
no,
good.
I'm right, everything else is
Self-reflection.
wrong, or this is right, and
Man,
everything else
that's
is bad.
absolutely key, I think. And right now, also, we got to recognize that we are all in a very confusing, disorienting, rapidly changing time. And that rate of change seems to be accelerating at an exponential rate. So let's all bear in mind that we all are kind of trying to grasp for a hold, aren't we? Doesn't it feel like we're just trying to get a hold of something that feels safe and secure, or gives us at least even a sense of meaning and identity? Because it's such a just completely discombobulating time to be alive in. And you know, and we've talked about this before. I'm excited to be alive right now, but it certainly is hard. And you know, I do have a deep compassion for people that are taken in by any ideology and become possessed by our ideologies, because I've been ideologically possessed myself. And the orientation, perhaps, in a lot of ways, was good orientation. It was my heart that cared about things that made me passionate, but then self-righteousness came about, and then, you know, that kind of blame the outside went on for a while. Oh, it's these people causing this and that, and
It's always,
really, I can't control everything that's happening out there, but I can control me. And I realize that you know, we could have a revolution tomorrow. It won't be a lasting success because we ourselves have not had enough of inner revolutions to be able to live up to the higher ideals that we wish this world would live by. But you know, how far we've come in such little time as a human species. What a wonder we are. And this is what I think. So we keep thinking about ourselves, and part of the problem here for us is that we keep thinking of ourselves as separate. And there is a proven experience, now scientifically studied and verified, of an unmistakable sense of oneness that we can experience in higher states of consciousness, meditation, yoga, and all different kinds of techniques. You know, psychedelics and things have all allowed human beings to achieve these states for eons, but then special long-term training to cultivate the capacity to stay deeper in these states are also employed. But that's all to say that we're all on a continuum, and we are the unraveling of the cosmos through this living planet up to this point. We are the extensions of this living planet that have become self-aware, self-reflective, that are having disagreements with other pieces of ourselves. And it's like the earth and all of its little appendages sticking out as human beings and trees and grass and roots and everything else. But I'm really not a separate human being. I'm part oxygen. What the heck is that? And I'm part sunlight, you know, whatever that vitamin D stuff is. And I'm part of this earth that I eat and ingest, and it forms my body. And I cannot exist without any of those things. So what am I really? Yes, my consciousness seems to be centered in this body, but I am intrinsically interconnected with everything and everyone around me. And right now, we're trading atoms as we speak.
yeah,
with
get
each
your
other,
atoms off of me.
with the table, with everything. So that's the real deal. That's what we're really doing here. And what is that? That's a great, astounding miracle. And that great mystery, I think, is something worthy of reverence, whether you want to believe in a personified, you know, particular kind of God or not. It doesn't matter which kind of God you believe in, as long as I think we're on the same page as this world's great religious and spiritual traditions are on, which is that at the very bottom of things, love seems to be the highest supreme unifying principle of life. And that's what we're all looking for in belonging and meaning, to do something we love, to be with other people that we love, to love ourselves truly, and to be able to learn how to be our most authentic and optimal selves for each other and for this world. We are here flying along on spaceship Earth, and it's starting to feel like it's breaking apart at the seams, and civilization may crash in on itself, and we have nothing better to put in place. And now, if we want to create a better system, maybe we should take that Buckminster Fuller route and create a new one that makes the existing one obsolete before we tear the existing one down. Let's start building the scaffolding of a better world around us. So whether that be capitalism 2.0 or your own particular idea of, some new kind of governing system that we haven't even thought of yet, let's bring the best of all worlds together and let them compete in the marketplace of ideas, and let's form something that we can all agree on well enough to be able to function in together. I think that is all that's left to us at this point, if we want to have a better world for ourselves and those that come after us. And what else, and what more sturdy, securing kind of thing can we do right now in this time of destabilization? Because this gives us something to hold on to. This gives us even an answer or a solution to start acting for, so we can create actionable hope rather than just having some naive hope that it's all going to work out, and just sitting back and hoping some heroes come along and save the day for us. No hero can do this alone. They need all of us, and we need to be the heroes that we wish for as well. So I think that's the game. That's where we're at, and that's exciting, and that feels encouraging. Hey, does that strike you as encouraging as well?
I don't know what it feels like to be encouraged anymore.
You're practiced at the gruff Eeyore.
Yeah, well,
I feel you. I mean, and I don't mean to say like I've been there kind of thing, but
well,
I did experience that for many years.
It's maybe not an issue.
The sense of being jaded by this world and disappointed.
I wouldn't
this
even
world.
call it jaded. I don't.
Is it a disappointment, or
No,
are you feeling
no, I just
frustration, or
I don't get excited about things. Like I can't remember the last time I got excited, or have been
positively excited?
Yeah, that feeling, or looking forward to something, or hoping for things. And it's not a jaded response. It's a self-measuring response, because I have a very reactive emotional system. So in order to keep on the mellow, I try not to get too inspired or too excited or too up or too and anticipate too much or any of that. And sometimes it sucks as well. No, I get it. Like in the moment, I enjoy things. I'm not like mopey. Like I enjoy things in the moment. But they're like, man, aren't you excited? We're going out camping, this weekend or whatever. It's like, yeah, it'll be fun.
It's the extremes from the swings.
Yeah, I try not to do those, because when I do, the swing back sucks.
Well, that's actually very a Buddhist or Zen kind of orientation, to where you're not supposed to be taken in by overjoy as much as to be taken in by your own psychological suffering. You're supposed to be able to be kind of aloof from it, and being excessively smiling and happy is just as, I guess, perhaps too egoic or too much in samsara for Buddhism as being very psychologically depressed or anxious or busy-minded or whatever in some other way.
Yeah, well, if there's stability in either end of the spectrum or the middle, stability is preferential to the swings.
Yeah. Oh, there's a time to laugh and a time to cry too.
For sure.
Guess, it all comes.
I just got news that a dear friend of mine died. Haven't felt sad yet. It'll come. It's
the shock hits us, man.
Well, it's a slow burn kind of thing. It's a build opposed to an all at once. I never understood it. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm, what do they call it? Neurodivergent.
Well, it depends on how the thing happens too. When you lose someone, for instance, there's so many different circumstances of when and where you are when you hear it, or if you're actually there, and then how they passed, and there's so many others play into how one reacts to it emotionally.
Well, so each human is very different from every other human, but we are all extremely the same. And even if this we are one thing actually isn't the case, humans still function better when they behave as if it is. Kind of like when, Jordan Peterson says, he behaves as if there is a God. Well, if we behave as if we are all
People
one,
ask him if he believes in God, and he says, well, I don't know how to answer that, but I act as if there is one.
So that leaves room for, well, if there isn't this oneness between humans, we still get way better results at getting along and around with each other
if we orient ourselves
ourselves
as
that
such.
way. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So
we seem to get along better
that's
when
great.
we
I
do.
like that. Yeah,
you know?
and it is
So
absolutely
even
true
if
that we are
if
too.
people don't want to go
you
into
know?
the spiritual end or the hippy dippy end,
Yeah, you
or
don't
this,
have to
that,
go
or
into
that
even the
end,
spiritual.
it's
Purely philosophically.
pragmatic. It's pragmatically stable.
I mean, it is our actuality as well. Even science shows us this. Now, what do we take from that fact that we are intrinsically interconnected?
But back to the video, science showed us that COVID.
Yeah.
That COVID.
Good point. That's a good.
Sorry, we
segue.
went to rambling, but yeah, no. But as soon as he brought up the fact of seeing the shift in his friends and his peers that were good-meaning people and shifted into totalitarian, hostile tyrants. Yeah, I can relate to that, and it's still going. But I don't think, the punching a dude in the face because he believes in something you don't believe, and that's whether you're coming from the left or the right or whoever's the aggressor. Frankly, you get one punch. You punch me once. You punch me a second time, okay, it's on. And that's intellectually as well. So, insult me once, that's fine. You insult me again, I'm going to burn you. Bad, because I'm quick and witty. And that's the other thing with the extremes. That's probably what got me in trouble, because, I'm asking smart-ass questions to these poor young theys and thems. I don't know if I can call them ladies. I'm just being snarky, but yeah, but it's kind of true. Yeah, no, like, I can say stuff
It's
that
also
cuts
what they
and
would
is witty.
expect if they consider themselves these pimps too. So, hey.
I don't know. You get he or you get she. And if I don't know because it was the person who sat on this bench before me left it with a big old shit smear on it, they suck, I'll use that too, but it's too confusing for me. I can't do it. I love you, but nah. Pick one.
Hey, we got some love though.
No, yeah, no. Like,
And
hey,
that's, as long as we got that, I think we're all right.
if I don't
As long
care
as
about
that's
you,
what buoys everything, because we can't be upset about something unless we truly care about it.
well, yeah.
And-
If I don't care about you and I don't have an iota of love for you,
Right.
I don't really
None of us
care.
like being in
I'm just,
disagreement
bye.
with one another.
But also,
Speaking of disagreements, remember COVID?
yeah, well,
So let's.
the aftermath is still happening.
It
It's
is.
still
It
happening.
is still happening. And
The
recently,
systems
you might
are
have.
still in place.
Yes.
Track, trace, and database.
Yes. Yes. Oh yeah. So, and they're always gearing up for the next thing now. You can feel that coming.
So, but what he was saying is about slotting in.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to believe it's a huge cabal. Like it probably is, but like some conspiracy theory, like they made the virus to come out there. No, they just waited and they made a plan. And when the plan happened, they were like, "Bam! All right, we got something we can slot into here and see how it works."
Yeah. Right.
Like you can do that. You plan for your life. When the situation happens, you slot in the plan that you had and you work with it. Like it doesn't have to be this. Oh, they manufactured it and released it. I definitely believe it came from a lab, and I think science proves that, without a shadow of a doubt, it came from
Well,
a
that seems to
freaking
have been
lab.
verified numbers of times over,
Whether it was
including by people that worked at the lab.
Whether it was maliciously released or not,
That's a question.
That's a
We
question.
don't know.
I
Well, we
think
do know
I
that
think it was just
regardless
bad.
if it was purposefully engineered and released by, say, China, it actually certainly was allowed to escape through all the ports that they kept open, even though they immediately closed.
oh no,
The rest of mainland China off from Wuhan, they left the ports open for what, 2 or 3 weeks?
well in the U.S. too,
Knowing that it was out there because they closed themselves off the
and
mainland.
President Trump at the time was trying to stop people from coming in from China, and he was being blocked at every level,
for it.
media,
Even
everything.
though it had nothing to do with race.
Whether you like Trump or not, this is what happens.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it doesn't have to be a malicious release, but if there's failures on every end, and like it
Well, certainly
seems like it was intentional in
China
some ways,
definitely
but
took advantage of it when it happened, at the
Yeah.
very least, because they kept those ports open. They knew that was advantageous
But
for
I
them if the rest of the world got this as well.
I personally don't believe that it was intentionally released, and here's one reason why. Like, okay, China doesn't really care about its civilians, but this virus in particular is really nasty towards Asian people because of their ACE2 receptors. They have more of them, and that's what this virus sticks onto, and it really messed them up. It hit them hard. They were welding people into their homes. I remember seeing like the Beijing Tower complexes and just the wailing that just makes
High-rise
me
apartments, and they were literally welding people's windows and
Dude,
doors shut
yeah, like
to trap them in their homes.
I remember seeing the, like video of people videoing it and just the wailing, and it sounded like descending into the pits of hell and the suffering from those in there, man. It was like, and I don't get weirded out and like emotional very often,
But that
because of what
that
we talked
disturbed you,
before.
huh?
That hit me
I
real,
remember
real
that, man.
deep.
That was freakish.
And that was, when I first saw that, that was probably the really turning point where I'm like, China, no, they are a hostile entity towards the United States and their own people and the world. This cannot happen.
Those poor
in
people
the
are
world.
under a government that is obviously some kind of neo-communist.
Oh, the Chinese Communist Party, they're communists.
Well,
They don't even lie about it.
They're their own particular
Communism with Chinese
mutated version of it,
characteristics.
but they are, and you see what happens under those kinds of authoritarian regimes.
And the thing that freaks me out too is it can come to the West, and it will.
Oh, it's
If we
definitely
don't pay
seeped
attention.
deep into our society as of late, and the past, few decades. That certainly they have been whittling away at us for a long time in academia, since the 50s, really, and it has continued up to now. And they have weaponized cultural Marxism in order to infiltrate and weaken this country and
Part of
many
that
other
is-
industrialized nations around the world, freedom-loving nations.
Well, queer theory,
that were
critical race theory,
yeah,
all that stuff
government's
is
designed to be of the
cultural
people and by the
Marxism.
people is a very new phenomenon in this world. And everybody having access to the marketplace is a very new phenomenon. We used to all just be serfs and slaves. Every single culture, in fact, has certainly enslaved its own people and others.
Well, there's more
The word slaves comes from
the
Slavic for this.
or the word Slav comes from either way, but
Yeah.
there are more slaves now than there ever was.
And most of them are in China.
Oh, dude, did you see the footage of the Chinese like mine owners in like I think it's like Zimbabwe and well other places in China just beating the crap out of these native-born Africans in their own country, just beating them with whips
Ooh,
and
I heard
whipping
about
them.
it. I heard about it on some news show.
I think
Yeah.
if you look up Serpenza, he might have shown that.
How do you spell that?
Like Serpentza, like
okay.
Serpenza.
S-A or Z-A?
ZA. He does a lot of like in-depth stuff, and he loves the Chinese culture and the Chinese people. He's not allowed back in China for obvious reasons.
Well, that government is
and I
something
also
else.
like like Chinese history and the culture of China, and I love the people anywhere. I don't, I tend not to judge peoples by their worst constituents, but
Right. Let's jump over here to this
yeah.
article from the NIH while we're on the COVID subject.
yeah.
Because quite recently, and you might not have heard this, even though it should have been, leading headlines across the world. The NIH, well, here, let's scoot on over here.
Scoot on over.
Yeah.
There
Okay,
it
so
is.
the NIH has finally admitted that we taxpayers, funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan, China, after years of denials. So,
Yeah, before we go any further,
yeah.
I'm going to call it. It was through Eco Health Alliance. What was it? Bobolinsky? Is that the guy? Or maybe, hold on. I may be wrong on that, but yeah, it was through Eco Health Alliance, and they were it was basically a shell company for taxpayer dollars to go to the Wuhan Institute. And this was known years ago.
And if anyone has a problem with the oldest published newspaper in the U.S., which is not just right, but it reports news across the spectrum, it's been around for a minute. You can see that we got this article on Yahoo as well here.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's
Look at
jump
that
on into this.
schmuck. There we go.
At long last, National Institutes of Health, NIH Principal Deputy Director Lawrence Tabak admitted to Congress Thursday that U.S. taxpayers funded gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China in the months and years before the COVID-19 pandemic. What is gain-of-function research? It is when we modify a virus and make it more susceptible to human tissue in order to study its effects on the human body so that we can prepare potential vaccines for it, even though any virus can mutate in a trillion different directions and we could never predict which way it's going to go. We're testing what it really is weaponized biological warfare,
And
that they're doing at these
And we're testing a lot of these viruses on human mice chimeras as well.
Ooh.
To give Alex Jones his due. Oh, we're gonna get canceled now saying that. But no, it's
We were already canceled
They
long
call
ago.
them humanized mice with humanized lung cell tissue in this particular case. But they're chimeras between humans and mice. Just so you know.
That's freakish.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dr. Tabak asked Representative Debbie Lesko, Republican of Arizona, of the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic, asked, did NIH fund gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology through Manhattan-based nonprofit EcoHealth Alliance? And then he answers, it depends on your definition of gain-of-function research. Clever.
That's the same crap that Fauci was saying.
Tabak
too.
answered, if you're speaking about the generic term, yes, we did. Oh, covering his ass.
So here's the generic term is just
You don't want to get caught lying.
experimenting on viruses is to give it new functions.
Yes.
Now, whether or not the functions were to directly infect new humans, they may be able to skirt around. But the fact that we experiment, and
Well, that's exactly what gain-of-function research is.
yeah, well, and it,
That's the only
you
reason
could
it-
say, well, we're not giving it any functions that would matter for humans. But no, actually,
Well, we're not doing it for any kind of nefarious
it-
reasons, they would say. We're trying to help.
It turns out for COVID-19, it was being made to be more infectious in human lung cells.
So the response comes after more than 4 years of evasions from federal public health officials, including Tabak himself, former National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases Director Dr. Anthony Fauci.
I am science.
About the about the controversial research practice that modifies viruses to make them more infectious. Beck added that this is research, the generic term gain of function, generic term is now how they phrase it, is research that goes on in many, many labs around the country. Yes, sure does, that's right. It is not regulated, and that is scary. And the reason it's not regulated is it poses no threat or harm to anybody.
Unless it gets out,
Unless it gets out, dude. What in history has ever been completely seal-proof or foolproof?
So I guess this guy would be okay with the Chinese biolab that they found in California.
Yeah, look at how you have to suit up when you're doing this kind of research. Like, okay, yeah, this is no threat or harm to anybody. Dr. Bryce Nichols, a professor of genetics at Rutgers University and co-founder of the pandemic oversight group Biosafety Now, told the Post the exchange was two people talking past each other. Tabak was engaging in the usual obfuscation and semantic manipulation that is so frustrating and pointless, Nichols said, adding that the NIH bigwig was resisting accountability for risky research that can create pathogens of pandemic potential.
Yeah, because nobody wants to go ahead and bite the bullet and take responsibility. So what you're probably going to end up seeing when people actually get tried for this is it's going to be kicked down and kicked down and kicked down to some no name that's just going to bite the bullet for them.
Right, yeah. Yeah, someone else is going to have to take the heat. Instead of addressing this directly, Tabak launched into a useless response about how gain of function encompasses many types of experiments, he added.
So that's a little bit of editorializing there. Useless.
Yeah, that's not necessary. Yeah, of course. I don't like that editorializing in journalism either.
Just thought I should point that out. But
if it's going to be an opinion piece, be an opinion piece. If you're going to be the news, don't play the same stuff that we see the corporate neo-liberal, not really liberal,
I would
but
probably say evasive.
pretends to be liberal media.
Evasive response
utilizes.
about how gain of function encompasses many types of experiments. So that was more evasive than this. Now, we haven't watched it yet, and hopefully we can. But I've seen too many of these trials, and I know what it probably was.
Even evasive is an opinion, but you could just mention that this is how he responded. And let the
if you want to
public
go super
determine for themselves.
It's the New York Post. We get articles about aliens too, so you got to take,
So, everyone reports on aliens nowadays.
Harvard, what was it? Harvard now had a study that how aliens might be real. Ooh.
There. Well, we're in a giant universe full of stars, and we exist.
No, but here, in ancient aliens.
Ancient aliens. Yeah,
Maybe the Anunnaki.
That's like a money pit right there. I think that's why. There's a lot of money to be made in alien.
Even Harvard's doing clickbait now. Man, what kind of world are we in?
Very greed-driven world, sadly. A very materialistic world. So, Yeah. So he launched into his response of how gain of function encompasses many types of experiments. So in July 2023, the U.S. Health Department U.S. Department of Health and Human Services barred the Wuhan Institute of Virology from receiving federal grants for the next 10 years. EcoHealth Alliance, whose mission statement declares it is working to prevent pandemics, had all of its grant funding pulled by HHS for the next 3 years on Tuesday. This is very controversial research, and a lot of people that are epidemiologists and virus experts don't like that this kind of stuff is going on. Most people, I think, as far as I understand it, most scientists and experts on disease and pandemics think that this kind of research is insane and incredibly foolhardy and dangerous. This is how you actually introduce the very things that you're trying to prevent.
Yes, but
by taking them out of the wild, studying them, and then making them more susceptible to human tissue to see what happens.
But our anointed rulers that have a much higher intellect than all the rest of us plebs, they know what's best for us, and they can handle it.
Yeah, well,
the hubris.
The people we have in office nowadays, I'm afraid, don't represent the will of the people.
Well,
that
in office, in university, in companies, they all suck. They all suck.
Well, we have major multinational corporate players now that have more money than whole nations, and that when they team up in cartels, groups together, they can form a power base that is stronger than even the U.S., and they can influence and manipulate our government to their own ends. And so what we're looking at nowadays, I'm sad to say, is what seems to be a growing corporate, totalitarian, technocratic, authoritarian kind of dictatorship.
It's like fascism, but you put the corporation on top and instead of the state on top.
It would be even more dangerous than any state-run authoritarian regime, because corporations are
highly
only
efficient machines
to profit and growth at any cost.
Well, there's private corporations and public corporations.
When they're not beholden to the ethical and moral foundations of the nations that they're born out of, because we do have some safeguards in place. We do have some sense of shared morality left in our countries today, but boy, is it dwindling and being destroyed from the inside out.
One way to keep a corporation in check is to limit the money you put into it. But when you have a government that will take all the money it gets from its citizens and just automatically put it into supermassive corporations or nefarious corporations, you can't boycott them. You can't boycott Raytheon. You can't boycott Boeing. You just can't do it. You can't boycott EcoHealth Alliance, and you can't do it because the government controls the money going into it, and that's the problem. But the thing is like right now the government will think, in governments around the world, oh, we're in the top position. Well, that's going to change. Like if you pay attention to what the WEF is talking about, that's going to change, and it's going to be the supermassive corporations that are on top telling the governments what to do, even more so than they already are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And our governments become facsimiles of what they once were, and they're literally just kind of a label on a box anymore. The things we used to stand for are only there in the logo and a statement rather than in practice. And that seems to be kind of what we're all being forced into right now around the planet. And to accomplish this task, the greediest among us have found quite sophisticated ways to pit us against one another, to divide and conquer, as it were. So let's jump back here and scan a little bit more of this article before we move on, guys. So
we're past the
EcoHealth. Yep. EcoHealth Alliance President, Dr. Peter Daszak.
Sorry, Bob Alinsky was the
Daszak. That's right. Yep.
Was the whistleblower for the Biden stuff.
There you go.
Daszak. Sorry, there's a lot of guys.
Right. So Daszak, in a hearing earlier this month before the House Select Subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic, testified that his organization never has and did not do gain-of-function research by definition. But that claim directly contradicted Daszak's private correspondence, including a 2016 email in which he celebrated the end of an Obama administration pause on gain-of-function research. The EcoHealth head was also called out in sworn testimony to the COVID panel by Dr. Ralph Barrick, a leading coronavirologist who initiated the research himself and declared it was absolutely gain of function. So one of the people that actually instituted this research declared that was, of course, absolutely gain of function.
Yeah, and there was emails that went around, and they were talking about like there's like no way that this couldn't have been made in a lab. And I heard something funny, and I'll have to fact check this, but like about midway through the pandemic.
Well, the cleavage site on it, they can see how it was it was manipulated.
Well, I heard something that like there may have been a gene sequence that was a Moderna patent also in the virus. Now,
oh my God!
Somebody who's watching this, go ahead and fact check it for me, because you know how the
Please.
internet is. Any useful information is hidden and guarded, and I'm a freaking Luddite, and
yeah, we're all prone to being wrong.
I won't
so
say,
let's
but like no, like
figure it out together here.
and also like okay, they were experimenting on bats that had coronaviruses. They had genetic sequence for this virus and sequenced it very quickly.
Yes,
there was
did.
emails that Fauci, corresponding emails with Fauci, where they're talking about it's like, look, like this.
Well, that's what they do at the Wuhan Institute too. Is they study bat-borne coronaviruses. Mm-hmm. They were doing gain-of-function research on bat-borne coronavirus. So here we are. In an October 2021 letter to Congress, Tabak had acknowledged NIH funded a limited experiment at the Wuhan Institute of Virology that tested whether spike proteins from naturally occurring bat coronaviruses circulating in China were capable of binding to the human ACE2 receptor in a mouse model. Yep. He did not describe it as gain-of-function research, but disclosed that EcoHealth failed to report the bat coronaviruses modified with SARS and MERS viruses had been made 10,000 times more infectious in violation of its grant's terms. That is, by definition, gain of function. It's gained a function. It's gained a new function.
So what was that about? Hold on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can't see too well, so I got to get close. Yeah, so it's been made 10,000 more times infectious.
Yes.
And what were they testing this on? Like human rat chimeras. Yeah.
So the NIH scrubbed its website of a long-standing definition for gain-of-function research the same day that the letter was sent.
Yeah, what was I talking about?
Come
the
on.
internet scrubbing stuff and taking stuff away and trying to find stuff.
Yeah. So Tabak also noted in his October 2021 letter that the sequences of the viruses are genetically very distant from COVID-19, but other grant proposals from EcoHealth have since drawn scrutiny for their genetic similarities. Fauci has repeatedly denied that the Wuhan lab research involved gain-of-function experiments, clashing with Republicans in high-profile hearings and plain semantics with the term during a closed-door interview with the House COVID panel earlier this year. He needs to define his definition of gain-of-function research because, as I have, through this process in the last 3 years, read many published articles about gain-of-function research or creation of chimera, this is a new one.
Oh, hey, they mentioned it.
They mentioned it. So COVID Subcommittee Chairman Brad Winstrup, Republican of Ohio, said this following Fauci's grilling in January. So, oh my goodness. So this article kind of goes on for a ways, but that introduces you guys to. Are we looking at?
Yeah, I was looking at the part about just making sure I read it right.
Yeah.
I'm pretty
Go ahead
blind.
and check this out, guys. It's out there. All you have to do is look.
Don't even worry about.
I'm not put a link here in the podcast description. Wherever you're at, you'll see it.
But you don't even have to go to the New York Post. It's undeniably out there now.
Yeah.
And then there's a Dr. John Campbell
There's the
on
name of the
YouTube,
article.
and he's been really good about following this whole thing in an objective
John
sense.
Campbell is awesome.
And he was really and actually on board with like what was going on with COVID, and not like against it, but like, okay, this is what they're telling us.
Yep.
He was showing the the NIH releases, and then Britain's, I guess NIH is Britain, and then the HHS, and doing all that stuff. But then there was a point where everything got fishy. And so Dr. John Campbell is a really good resource for that in time as it was happening and watching a person change throughout the whole thing.
Shout out to John Campbell.
Because it made a lot of people crazy during the COVID, but it also woke a lot of people up. and that should be forgotten. The fact that how many people had actually woke up. You're not alone. Yeah, something's wrong, and yeah, there's some really like bombastic ideas about things that would happen and everything. But when looking at this information, you kind of have to view it in the end as like, okay, is the presenter trying to, as best they can, present the information as it is, and then when they're giving their opinion, stating it's their opinion, or is it something that feels like somebody's trying to coerce you into feeling some sort of way?
Right.
Whether it's, against the man or for the man or against the stream or in the stream or like whatever it is, we can't help but manipulate each other in different ways, but is it an honest, like,
Well,
hey,
we
this
can,
is how
but we
I
have to learn to
feel.
catch ourselves doing that.
Well,
Yeah.
you manipulate your fork to feed yourself. It's not always a bad thing. The word manipulate has
We seek to influence positively
Sure,
and negatively. I see. Yeah, for sure.
So,
Well, so here's something else from a gentleman I came across recently named Martin Shaw, who is a quite well-known mythologist if you're into the study of ancient myths. He's one of the world's few remaining people that actually practices the ancient bardic tradition of telling stories. This gentleman is known for being able to tell stories that last days, hours and hours and hours long, from the top of his head without anything written down. That ancient tradition, storytelling. And he, being a self-proclaimed pagan or Wiccan, I think he studied Buddhism for some years, recently made quite the announcement, and it surprised a lot of people. Paul Kingsnorth is actually another one of these people that has made this pronouncement recently. We're seeing an awakening or a revolution, as Vervaeke termed John Vervaeke in the series that we recently covered here on Actuali, the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis lecture series. In the very first episodes, Vervaeke introduced us to the idea of a mindfulness revolution occurring in the world and a resurgence of interest in spirituality, particularly Eastern spirituality. But now we're seeing a resurgence of another ancient tradition that is quite profound to see occurring, as it is in these kinds of people, former atheists like Ayaan Hirsi Ali and the quite known in the podcast world historian Tom Holland recently published the book Dominion. So we're going to be digging into this now.
And then there's Russell Brand. Like Joe Rogan seems like he's flirting with it.
Yeah. Well, Jordan Peterson's been defending the value of it, even as he himself will not admit if he considers himself a Christian or not. So let's talk about that Christ guy, or let's at least consider that Christ guy here with Martin Shaw, the mythologist. On over. Bigga bang, bigga boom.
While we have
want to take a quick break and then come right back?
Well,
hey
since
guys,
we're recording, we'll cut it. We're not podcasting, are we?
Yeah, fam. And if you're looking to make a podcast, check out Spotify for podcasters. This is an ad that I do for Spotify because they took over Anchor, which I used to record a podcast on, and now I'm recording through Spotify for Podcasters app, which is actually quite handy and convenient. And I'm very excited to be on the same platform as Joe Rogan and Duncan Trussell and many other crazy mofos of great renown and repute, and even infamous individuals, you may consider them. However, I'm happy to be here with all of these crazy hooligans and hoodlums and heathens. And I just want to invite you guys to come on over to Spotify for podcasters. I'm probably going to cut this part out anyway. So
yeah, no, I was just letting you go. I was actually going to disparage Spotify and be like, I still don't have
good
the
practice. Get our gibberish strong. Yeah. So let's take a quick break, fam. We're going to be right back. Okay, pause. Back to your scheduled programming. All right, so now we're going to jump in and we're going to watch this video about Martin Shaw. Let's go ahead and jump on over. Boom.
For somehow the message has got confused in Christianity that we are once a week we gather and we eat our God on a Sunday. If that's not radical enough, that even freaked the pagans out. Our God or Christ is born a fugitive, he dies an outlaw, he's a scandal from beginning to end. Anybody that comes anywhere near him tends to have some sort of troubling encounter. There's always consequence for getting near Christ. He'll talk to anybody, but then the stakes with which he brings into that conversation.
Oh boy.
Uh-oh. That
Internet. Dun, 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 dun,
ba,
ba, ba.
ba, ba,
Dun, dun,
da,
dun,
da,
dun,
da,
dun,
da,
dun,
da,
dun.
da,
The internet is bad in this little corner of West Virginia right now.
Is an
Oh, we're back. It's an absolute scandal.
absolute sort of derailing of probably everything you thought possible up until that moment. So we're dealing with, ironically, kind of countercultural outlaw material. For me, as someone that is, I've had my finger in, I've had my hand in the cookie jar of mythology for 30 years. There's very little I haven't explored, but I have not come across anybody that says the things he says. Now, the architecture of Christ's life, yeah, that's relatively familiar, death and rebirth. We get this through Fraser and Lewis and Tolkien and the rest. But where the rubber really hits the road is what he said. It's what he did. It's easier to project on mystical gods from a long time ago because they don't come with the mission statement of something like the Sermon on the Mount. That's why I avoided him. Christ was too much reality for me. It was too real. This sort of what Jesus was going to do to my imagination, my legs buckled under the task when I was younger. So I went to lots of other flowers. Now, the thing is, there's many, many thousands of people just like me or you who are looking for a deeper life, who are trying to figure out what actually it means to be a human being, have probably ayahuasca'd themselves stupid at some point or another. They may know the Tibetan Book of the Dead left, right, and center, but at some point, and maybe midlife is a moment where that tends to happen, it's worth attending to the mythology of your ancestors. This strange happening. It's this unruly, peculiar.
Well, while it's paused.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that it was too real. It was too real, but also Christianity and, well, religion in general, but Christianity, when Christ was talking about, puts a standard in which you should behave. And I feel that it has become too common to be to have a general distaste for having limitations placed on people. Because it's like, well, limitations are bad. It's like, well, like if you're not allowing somebody to fulfill their talents, yeah, that's bad. But if you're requiring, in order to do this, that you can't, participate in self-destructive activities, yada yada yada, you hold yourself with a certain amount of respect, and like.
Or there are many limits in this world that we enjoy too.
Well, the world is made of limits.
Yeah, and a story can only be so long for us to be able to enjoy it. So it has to have an ending at some point.
Yeah.
And the sheet of paper that we're writing on can't be infinite, or that we're drawing on. The games that we love to play or watch, engage in, are also structured with so many limitations to be able to create the actual playing field for us to partake in. So limits are useful for us, and they give us boundaries and an understanding of what we can or can't do in a situation. Within those boundaries, those limitations, you can be endlessly creative.
Yeah, and I guess, like, another thing within what he was saying with that is he looked away from it. He didn't want to touch on it. He wanted to get away from it because
Such a high calling.
It was very real, and since it was very real, like, without a shadow of a doubt, Jesus was a real human being.
Oh, yeah.
What he exactly looked like and exactly what happened and what kind of shoes he was wearing, and
We don't know.
we don't necessarily know, but without a shadow of a doubt, that was a real human being. Which means when he was saying something, that was a real thing that was said.
Well, many, of course, not even many, but atheists historians agree that he absolutely did exist. We've done the research, and we find that he's the most accounted for historical figure in history.
Yeah. So it's almost natural to shy away from the very, very real, and particularly when it comes to limitations, because like a far-fetched, flamboyant limitation, like, well, we're all star seeds and our only limit is our imagination. Okay, well, that doesn't really mean anything. A limitation of like, say, like, hey, you need to watch what comes out of your mouth and how you behave around people, or else you're going to doom yourself to suffering. That's
useful.
real.
That
That's
helps you
real,
orient. Yeah,
and that hits you hard. And
you can navigate by that. You can live by that. Yeah.
But there's a tendency to be like, oh wow, okay, that requires a lot of work. It's going to be very uncomfortable. I gotta. Your brain's just like, okay, put that to the side. Whereas the wishy-washy stuff, it's like, oh yeah, I can play with that all the time because you're safe from it. It doesn't, But yeah, so that's the end of my spiel.
Oh no, that was good though. So that was Martin Shaw, everybody. So feel free to check out Martin Shaw.
Is there any more to him? Is the internet working?
I'm not sure, but yeah, we can see if there's more to where he goes.
Yeah, let's just see if he goes a little further.
It's this unruly, peculiar explosion that goes off around Galilee. And there came a point where, as we've discussed in the previous program, it was so formidably present. Christ was so formidably present in my life, not as an exegesis, not as a philosophical conversation at that time, but as an encounter. I submitted, reluctantly submitted. So I'm finding, as you are, and the people, I thought your conversation was really good on this with Rupert Sheldrake, maybe about a year ago, where you asked him, you said, just what is going on? And I think Rupert said, he just said, look, people want more than the crustacean of Christianity. They think they know. There's a sensibility that there's something deeper. And actually, despite our disillusion, the conversation between rationality and irrationality doesn't have the hold culturally, I don't think, that it did maybe 15 years ago. And most of us, maybe lockdown had something to do with it, I don't know. There's a looking for depth. So that's the climate, I think.
When irrationality becomes the norm, I think we have to look for something else.
Yep.
Well, particularly,
Strangeness is the New Real was the name of that conversation, and that's Martin Shaw in conversation with Mark Vernon on Mark Vernon's channel here on YouTube.
So we have been coming out. We're in a post-rational society. Like, we did an experiment with rationalism and empiricism, and thinking that everything in life can be summed up. We're finding that it's a little bit more difficult than that.
The art of metaphor and imagination is actually something that is much more important and integral to well-functioning humans' lives and societies than we could have ever expected.
Well, as it turns out, the sum of the individual parts are greater than what we think of as the whole. So it doesn't make rational sense, but like we discussed in Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series, we got to a point where, well, what is rational? Well, what is rational? How are we defining rational? And what happens when rationality is not enough? And I think what he's getting at here is well, we've reached that point where rationality is not enough, and we've become very irrational as societies. And now there's a calling to something deeper, and particularly within Christianity. Your friend Gary, he uses the word churchist. For the people that just go to church and they eat their God and they're good, right? But it's more to that, and regardless of what religion or faith or practice that you're in, it's more than just the things that you do
or the statements we make about what we believe.
Yeah,
it's more about how we are.
Yeah, it's how you are and how you are going. That makes sense.
Because it certainly, and Jesus presented a way of being, just as Buddha represented a way of being for us as humans. So it's more than just saying, I believe in Jesus, that makes you a Christian. It's actually truly trying to follow that way. And I think that's what Martin was talking about, that this thing just made him buckle because it was too much to take on. It is such a high calling initially, and you feel like that's all that there is this impossible high calling. But what Jesus has given us in the gift of his being was this ultimate transcendent ideal that we'll never reach. Thus, we have perfect, infinite room forward through which to evolve. We will never be done. We have infinite room to grow. That's the gift that has been given to us as humans. There will be no cap on our potential improvement as long as we continue to seek to embody the way of Christ's love.
Well,
I think that that's the key.
it could be said by some that that's why the angels had such a problem with us. You know, mythologically speaking, the angels do not have the level of attainment and achievement and creation over time that humans have. Angels don't create; they don't give birth to things. They're
not
don't
time-space bound. Like
Yeah, and we as humans share something with the Creator that the angels didn't have, and that's what they say, in His image. We are creators ourselves. We create universes within books. We create children. We create families. We create networks between people and communities. We create new methods of going about in the world. We create severe amounts of destruction and harm and pain and suffering on us too. You know, it's not all just the good. And that makes us the perfect, I don't want to say prototype, because that seems like, you know, like, oh, there would be something better than this, but that makes us the best, you know, like the perfect thing to last through the universe and help co-create the universe as it is.
Earth has evolved to the point of creating earthling extensions of itself, cosmos through the Earth. So there's this earthen flavored, self-reflective aspect of cosmic awareness that has developed into our universe, and we are experiencing it. We are doing that thing right now, whatever that is. We are that, and we are now learning together how we may best orient together. Thank God we have examples like Jesus to orient by, because there is a way of being there that is open for us all, that if we operate through this posture, this orientation to life, we may be able to ameliorate many of the great problems we now face as a species. But that is revolution that begins within each one of us.
Yeah.
That's the only way we can have any lasting, real outward evolution or revolution in this world, is to be able to live up to the ideals that we seek to see our societies live by.
Yeah, the systems may change, but if the individual doesn't change, tyranny is going to be the result. You could change, you know, say in governments, you can go from a monarchy to a republic to a democracy. And if you don't have individuals that are, I don't want to say conditioned, but habituated to self-question, seeing the one in all of us, but then also respecting the individual, but also being able to, you know, admit when they're wrong. If you don't have a change within not all individuals, but enough individuals, the results are going to be the same regardless of if you change the system.
Oh, for sure.
It's well, you know, that's
the
why
new system that's in place will actually be able to rapidly make itself even stronger than it was before at shutting down kinds of movements that could overtake it.
Well, and since our systems, our governing systems, our economic systems, our trade systems have gotten so massive that I don't want to say it's impossible to change them, but it's not practical to change them from the top down. Our only solution is to go from the bottom up.
That's it, man.
And when dealing with humans, you can't really force them to do stuff. Like with kids, you can just encourage them or inspire them or ask them, you know, like when working with a toddler, instead of saying, hey, you need to clean your room, you just ask them, it's like, hey, could you help me real quick? I'm picking up some of this stuff. Hey, that. And they're like, oh, yeah. And they're happy to do it. So
we want that revolution to succeed. We got to be that change we wish to see. That is the game.
Yeah.
Changes it, Sam. So let's go ahead and hit this one last video here. This is actually from the Dr. Phil show, and what a thing he did in this moment. Let's go ahead and open this up. Here we go.
What's going on? Electricity, 25% increase. Auto insurance up 33%. Used cars up 35%. Hotels up 15%. Groceries. This matters, up 25%. And this is a big one. You need $11,434 additional just to maintain the same living standard that you had in 2021. Did y'all get a raise?
No.
Between now and then?
Can't blame the
But that's what's
corporations for that.
happening. Rent is up 30%. Mortgage rates doubled. It's getting worse, not better. So what do you tell yourself about what you're going to do, how you're going to go about climbing out of this? Because we're headed in the wrong direction.
All that, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else, that is called Bidenomics. And we are very proud of Bidenomics.
Yeah. Okay. So
One thing I
I
want
don't
to
want
say,
to like leave us on a sour note there, but I introduced that because that is the stark reality of the world that we are in now, and we certainly can't just lay the responsibility of all of that on Joe Biden, because the man barely seems to be operating at all
what are you talking about?
at present. It seems that he's not the one that's really running the show
No.
there in the Oval Office. I'm pretty sure that it is everyone around him in his administration that is actually running the show at this point. And I think if we're all honest with ourselves, we can admit that we could all tell that that man's mind was going while he was running for president already. And there's a part of me that feels sorry for somebody being in that situation.
Well,
As gross as it is to see somebody willfully be such a corporate stooge. I remember when Biden defended the telecommunications companies when they wanted to start dividing up the internet. There was this movement called net neutrality, where because the public, pays for and created the airwaves and the internet now, the information that is accessible through the internet should never be throttled. It should never be tiered into different speeds and amounts that you can get access to or anything, because it's the public's, it's a commons, right? So what Biden did as senator was he was one of the people that helped champion AT&T, all the telecommunication companies, takeover of the internet streams, and helped them gain the capacity to be able to break the internet into different tiers of speeds and allotments of amounts of data that you were able to access. And that's a totally unfair thing. Everybody should have equal access to information, and it should be the commons. This is all of humankind's amassed knowledge that we have created and discovered together
yeah, so
and funded ourselves.
when they're talking like inflation, like our highest was 9% inflation. Well, the way we measure inflation now is definitely different than we used to. But you're looking at these prices like electricity up like 25%, auto insurance 33%, used cars 35%, hotels 15%, groceries up 25%. That shows you closer to where the real value of your dollar and the inflation of that is.
Yes, it does.
And we're being gaslit. They're telling you, oh, it's the economy, stupid. Oh, you're not smart enough, to know. Like, we are the anointed experts. We know better than you, even though they've changed the metrics at which they look at inflation. And the same thing actually goes with climate data. There's a thing called what they call homogenization, the homogenization of the data that makes everything look like we're getting hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. But it doesn't take into account actually how freaking hot it was in like the late 1800s and early 1900s comparatively. So we don't get this upward trend. We get more of like a U, and we're still not nearly as hot as it was when they're in the early 1900s, because they homogenize the data. And they tell us how they're doing this. You just have to look through all the stupid lingo and then all the data nonsense, and by data nonsense, I mean like,
It does seem that we're being distracted by this climate change theory from the actual destruction and degradation and pollution
Well, they don't
that
care about the pollution. They don't care.
major corporations are doing to the planet, to the water sources, the microplastics.
Well, dude, like Oregon is either shutting down or not allowing farms to farm if their tests for PFAS in the water, which are the forever chemicals,
forever
are
chemicals,
too
yeah.
high. But they'll still let the mass farmers do it all they want. And the mass farming causes even more issues than the micro farmers.
Yep.
So it's like
Continually destroying off the small family farmers.
But yeah, we
and
should be
taking
paying
greater control.
We should be paying attention to PFAS, but also we have to pay attention to research that we're finding actually there are, organisms that put out like fluorine compounds, and like we find naturally occurring fluorine compounds in the atmosphere as well. And then a friend of mine who deals with this kind of stuff is as soon as you put a sample into a plastic test tube, PFAS contamination from the test tube itself contaminates what you're doing, and then we're going to shut down farms. We need to get everybody off of meat. They're attacking our farmers. They're gaslighting us about what our dollar is worth. And this is all over the world too. Look at like what happened to like Spain and Greece when they switched over to the euro and the loans that they had to take out that completely bankrupted their freaking countries. Oh, but this was the way to go. Trust the experts, the anointed ones. Jesus is referred to as the anointed one too, and they used to say that the Christians, the followers of the anointed one and everything, but he never said he was the anointed one, and he lived by a better standard. These people, and hate to say it, but the more liberal activist types who went to college and think that they're part of this thing, that they're fighting against it, but they are the thing now, and they're like, well, don't make me feel stupid, or let me say the crap that I'm going to say that I just recycled. It's like, no, we have to hold each other accountable for hey, I don't care how high up in the echelon and this, that, or the other. It's like, have you looked into
Oh my gosh,
what
how
you're doing?
strange to see people on the left defending Hamas, a known death cult that literally throws people that are even suspected of being gay off of buildings on the daily. Like the way that these people treat women and our gay brothers and sisters
And
is
children.
abhorrent. It's terrifying.
the highest that you can get within Hamas's ideology and a lot of other extremist Islams is martyr. They'll tell their own people not to leave the buildings because their death will show the world how cruel their opponent is. Whether you believe it or, whether you like Israel or not or any other thing, that kind of mindset. And we have people in this country that are walking around going, the only solution is intifada revolution. Yeah, nah.
even know what intifada means.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Well, the actual translation is from the river to the sea, Palestine will be moved. And they don't know that either. And it's just like, look, you don't know what you're saying.
Clearly, in their own words, that their goal is the eradication of all Jewish people around the globe, not just in Israel. This is literally, that's literally the very thing that Nazis were doing. Exactly that very thing.
Hitler had an appreciation for radical Islam. He was astounded by their efficiency and the fact that they really hated Jews and that they pushed their beliefs through militaristic might. And Islam actually spread across the world and did a really good job of expanding itself as a religion. I'll give it that. Yeah. I don't believe in it. I think it's quite destructive, but it was successful. And this extremist version is extremist, and I don't like extremism, and I don't care what end of extremism it is, whether it's far leftist extremism, Islamist extremism, the crazy Baptist, you're going to freaking hell, and I'm going to give you a freaking hard time because of an
Fundamentalist extremism.
Like, I don't care. Like the atheist extreme, I don't care. It's all the same root of evil, in my book.
Yeah, and when we talk about Christianity on this show, we're not defending the institutional church by any means. We are just talking about the way of that one from Nazareth called Christ.
Yeah, and to see it in my own country, see the so-called the educated, class of, kids, I can call them kids now, I'm old enough, kids supporting this crap and not knowing what's going on, that's one thing. And to look back on history and look at the hippies, and okay, they were kind of like, taken over by the communists too, but, at least it was peace, love for the most part, except for like the Weather Underground and a few other people. Mm-hmm. But what shocks me is Not just the not acknowledging that it's happening and it's wrong, but the getting mad at you for pointing out that it's happening and being like, hey, this bothers me. This bothers me deep to my core. And I'm trying to tell you about it because I love you. And I think you should know what's going on with me and what's going on with the world. And they're like, oh, it's not happening. Or if it's happening, it's good. Or, well, what about like those right-wing fucking nut jobs? And at this point, it's like, okay, which ones? Which ones? Because they weren't the ones burning down our cities for 100 days in 2020. They weren't the people that are currently like in DC spray painting all the, all the statues and all this stuff and chasing out the cops. And they're also not the ones who are giving felonies to kids who are creating skid marks on a pride flag that's painted onto a freaking street, like Spokane, Washington.
Right? Or encouraging a new racism in the world as the solution to past racism, future racism, as Ibram X. Kendi tries to sell.
Yeah,
So, we are in very upside down times. And we are absolutely, fam, we are being pit against each other.
Yeah, we are.
We are being manipulated. And
when the right starts doing all this stuff, I'll call them out
just tricked into othering each other, and we're being attracted into narcissism and just identity, just this identity game, and trying to find meaning in social pursuits that are tailor-made to present themselves to us as benevolent, and many of the people following these ideologies have good intentions, but then we get tricked into hatred, and we get fooled into thinking that violence is justified to achieve our ends, and that we're absolutely right and we could never be wrong, and it's not even worth checking to see if we might be a little wrong on some aspects of any certain subject. That closed off possession of our minds and that groupthink mentality that takes us over is so self-destructive.
Yeah,
and we are not a perfect society by any means. We have a long way to go, but we are not supposed to be perfect angels right now. We're so early in our evolution still as a species.
Our potential is a perfect potential.
Yes.
We are not. Whether we raise to that potential is yet to be seen and will always yet to be seen. Like we were given dude, look at this planet that we're on. We're given all the opportunities. It is actually still really good, and we actually do have the wisdom to bring some species back from the brink, to clean up after ourselves, not to freak out and be like, oh, CO2, which we still don't know what CO2
Mother
does.
Nature and each other.
Yeah.
And that's the way that we can orient to make the safer, more sane world that we're looking for. But by just blaming and othering and hating one another, we're certainly not going to get anywhere. And seeing the worst things you could possibly imagine about people that you disagree with, believe in every bad thing that you hear about the other group out there that opposes yours. We're falling victim to
I want to
that,
bring up though that
divide and conquer.
Looking after the earth and doing what's right. That's slippery because right now we're being told that humans are just a cancer that's destroying the earth. So
that's right.
We have to be careful with that. Yes, we need to be stewards, but sometimes we have to have the reasoning and the wisdom to know when we shouldn't do something. Yeah. It's like, okay, well, yeah, maybe we can stop the warming of the planet and keep it under like 2 degrees within whatever the metric is, but we bankrupt the whole world and most people would die anyway. Well, then what's the freaking use? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, because we're trying to do terraforming live in the moment here before we've developed the technology and we even understand entirely how to do such a thing. This planet goes through solar cycles. We've definitely been on a much hotter planet for hundreds of millions of years, such as when the dinosaurs lived and everything was marshland here in America, and most of the polar caps were melted and the ocean level was much higher.
Well, they've been finding animals that are coming out of the permafrost. There was one that had like liquid blood. It's like, well, that's really cold where the permafrost is, but when that creature fell in that mud and got frozen, it wasn't as cold. So it must have been warmer than it was before, which means the planet was warmer at that period of time than it is or was maybe 100 years ago. And also pay attention to the sun because we've been hit by like a lot of flares lately. Probably one of the reasons
do we affect the health of this planet, the ozone layer, the lungs of this planet, the Amazon rainforest, the pollution,
the microplastics we're putting in the
Yeah.
water,
the degradation of our ground soil and so forth. Yeah,
the concentrating of certain materials into smaller areas that we probably shouldn't be concentrating into smaller areas. I get it, but you know, you can't kill all the cows because they're farting out too much methane. Everybody's going to starve. You can't just switch over to plant material because you kill more animals by growing the plants for human to eat than you do growing animals.
We can't even sustain the current amount of energy the world needs without using fossil fuels. Hundreds of millions of people, or potentially billions, would die if we tried to stop using fossil fuels too fast. We find ourselves in these situations where we have to innovate rapidly and also possibly prepare for what Nate Hagen's believes to be a certain coming great simplification of the way that we live our lives. We're just not going to be able to, we are getting to an energy bottleneck. The world is still continuing to grow in population. Our need for energy continues to accelerate as we advance our technological capacity. And now we are finding ourselves reaching a bottleneck to where brownouts might become a much more common thing on this planet in the industrialized nations.
Well, hey, if you already live in California in certain parts, you're probably used to that by now.
Right.
Sorry,
But
not digging at you, but digging at you.
But we should become more resilient, it seems. And it's not even a strange thing for people to be preppers anymore. It's, you know, ever since COVID, everyone's like, actually, it's probably a good idea to make sure you got some water, or you try and be a little bit more self-sustainable, or be able to live off the grid, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and you know, people make jokes about it and be like, yeah, you know, I see what the preppers are doing, but then they don't prep, and it's like, yeah, well,
Right.
do you have enough food for you and the people that are in there for 6 months to a year? Like, for real though. Because you know,
Well,
this,
and the only
this
way to
little
do
chart
that,
that's
and
right
we're-
here down
yeah.
below us, electricity up
that's still up.
25%. We've
Yeah.
had mass.
Yeah.
So one thing that is not the Obama, excuse me, Freudian slip, the Biden administration's fault. The huge initiative, you know, government initiatives into renewable, sustainable energies, which is solar and wind, which are not very cost effective. That's why your electricity is up 25%. Also inflation, but up 25%. Auto insurance. Well, you know, Trump was trying to help our auto insurance. Biden got in, screwed it over, sent it all to like Mexico and other places. Or not. Okay, so auto insurance, but then there's used cars, which is the 35%. Auto insurance is get more expensive because all the parts that we need, we don't create here. They have to come from other freaking places, and the value of the U.S. dollar is going down, which means it's going to take more dollars to get the materials that we need.
Hotels.
Plus, if
groceries.
you haven't noticed, our shipping
Groceries up 25% is an awful lot.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't help when we're attacking farmers.
Rent up 30% is a hell of a lot. Mortgage rates doubled is insanity. And that's why it's so hard for people to live without being in deep debt nowadays. And yeah, we certainly have to find a way out of this, but by being preppers and closing ourselves off from one another, that alone is certainly, you know, being a prepper might be useful.
Be a
in
prepper,
some
but open up
capacity,
your community.
But we have to learn how to prepare as communities. We have to actually have communities again. We have to learn how to create. Like, we lost track and we got off of the track there.
Well,
and now we're all afraid and pit against each other and extremely judgmental of each other. And we can't even see each other for who we are anymore because we're all just applying these super overgeneralizing labels on those with whom we think are our enemies or are opposed to us.
Yeah, because there is the thinking that somebody's your enemy and you're completely like wrong. But then there's being like, nah, they don't wish me wrong. And then some people actually really do, and the wisdom to tell the difference between the two. And usually it's by words. Listen to what somebody says. Take the time to actually listen to what they say, because we're a lot more honest than we think we are. You know, even the people that are trying to psyops us, they'll tell us every single day exactly what they're doing to us with a smile and say, no, we're not doing that. So listen to people, question them, question yourself, because you will deceive yourself. That's a thing our brain does. But our brain's a very good tool for this fleshy organism that we are.
Yeah, and let's remember to have patience and compassion for one another, because we all have been victims of quite intense and sophisticated and multi-billion-dollar funded psychological manipulation techniques since pretty much since we were born.
Yeah.
And so when people around you seem to be lost or just think differently than you, and are cruel about it even,
Yeah.
recognize that that is their programming playing out, that all of our programming has been playing out throughout our lives, and it's a process, a lifetime process to awaken from it. May we never consider ourselves woke. May we always be awakening.
And be curious, not cruel. So when you come across something, don't just ask. Well,
Why? Do
why?
you think that way?
Be the 3-year-old. Well, why? Well, I don't why. You might piss off people that way,
Sometimes
but
we
at
might
least
not
it's
have even
honest.
formulated it to ourselves before, and when you start thinking about your beliefs, you start to see, oh, wait a minute, yeah, maybe believing that completely
Well,
is a little bit
ideally, you'd
foolish.
get the other person to ask themselves why, and
That's right.
Or the other ideal is, well, they have a good explanation. And you're like, damn, all right, okay, that got me. Think on it.
Yeah. Well, guys, this has been a lot of fun. I hope you guys are enjoying what's happening here. This is the direction of the podcast henceforth, at least as far as the meaning-making series goes. We're going to try and figure out how we can make meaning of this world together. We're going to be looking at these current events. We're going to be looking at the reality of this.
Yeah. How do you wait?
How do I point to it?
Man, there we go. There we go.
That's hard to do, man. Hey, all right. Well, we love you guys so
Yeah.
very much. Thank you for being here. Make sure to smash that like and subscribe. Get out there and let's help change this world from the inside out. I've been Chris.
I've been DJ.
Look for us next week. We're going to be trying to get the live stream thing back up and running. Right now, we're just recording because the internet was awful today here, and I'm not sure why exactly that is. We're going to be looking into that and hopefully solving that issue so that we can get back to the live stream action as well. I think that's all I got.
Peace out, Girl Scout.
Peace out, fam. We love you guys. We'll talk to you soon.